This is the Erectile Dysfunction radio podcast where we tackle facts, explore the myths, and provide real solutions to help you take control of your sexual health and confidence. I am Mark Goldberg, certified sex therapist and host. For any men who are serious about resolving ED or other sexual challenges, we encourage you to visit our website, erectioniq.com, and use our additional resources. Reach out to us with questions or schedule a 15-minute complimentary Zoom call with myself or a member of our team. We are passionate about helping men like you, so do not hesitate to reach out. Today, we're talking about SAD, also known as Seasonal Affective Disorder. Seasonal Affective Disorder is a condition that affects millions of people. And what it means is that based on the seasons, people are prone to experience different moods or changes in mood. Most commonly, depression. The most common form of this is an experience of depression in the winter months. This episode is particularly pertinent right now because at the time of the episode's release, it will be shortly after most of the United States has changed the clocks, a phenomenon that's going to lead to the sun going down earlier, more hours of dark when people are awake, and there is a correlation to higher levels of depression during this time. So like we mentioned before, it's quite a common condition. It does affect millions and millions of people. And while many people will not fall into a bona fide depression, many people will experience a decline in mood. They will experience symptoms of depression, even if it does not meet diagnostic criteria. I will share with our listeners that I am somebody who certainly is impacted to some degree by this change in clocks. I do feel it. I feel a tiredness. I do feel that my mood does decline a little bit, and we'll get a little bit further into some of the steps that you and other listeners can take if you are one of those people that's impacted by it. Obviously, we also are going to talk a little bit about the connection between seasonal affective disorder and sexual function, erectile function, and relationships. Okay, so what are like some of the symptoms and signs of seasonal affective disorder? So on an emotional level, many people are going to experience low mood. They might be feeling like a sense of stuckness. Sometimes if it gets more intense, people can feel just a sense of hopelessness, lacking direction. Some people may also experience irritability, which is a common but not well thought about a symptom of depression as well. Physical symptoms of seasonal affective disorder can include like fatigue, changes in sleep patterns, changes in appetite. Another symptom is called anhedonia, which I think does impact a lot of people. And what that means is the loss of interest or not experiencing pleasure in activities that previously were pleasurable. It's also just important to note when we talk about changes in sleep and appetite, for some people, they end up sleeping more, but for other people, they have trouble sleeping. And the same thing with appetite. For some people, they will eat more, and for other people, they will find that they do not have much of an appetite. Now, these symptoms do emerge at different periods of time for different people. For some people, it happens with the clock change. I think that's pretty common. For other people, it will happen. Another common time that this happens for people is after the holiday season. So usually after that usually around the first week or two of January, right after New Year's, when it really is in like the thick or the dead of winter in many areas, at least in the United States. People are more likely to experience that. Obviously, if you are south of the equator, then things would be working in a backwards type of way in terms of the calendar. Okay, so what are some of the causes of seasonal affective disorder, at least in theory? So obviously a big one has to do with sunlight. For many people, sun, just being exposed to the sun, is something which impacts mood. People also, again, tend to be more active. There's a kind of hibernating feel that comes with the winter, so people tend to be less active. they tend to be in a more just lethargic type of condition. Obviously, the outdoors are oftentimes not as inviting. I know some people are outdoors type of people and they thrive in this environment, but many people do not. Many people do go into much more of a hibernating mode, both physically and mentally. So that lack of sunlight, both in terms of what it does directly, but also in terms of just people feeling motivated to be active, can both be factors. Now, in terms of some of the risk factors that people carry, so that there probably is a genetic predisposition, as there are with many conditions. That could be a general predisposition to depression, or it could be a predisposition to seasonal affective disorder. So if you know that you have a close blood relative, like a parent or a sibling, that has or does experience seasonal affective disorder, something that you should definitely be aware of. There are some other biological factors that could be at play in terms of circadian rhythm disruptions, as well as vitamin deficiencies and whatnot. Again, some of that might pertain to vitamin D, but without naming any other specifics, these are factors that might impact somebody's predisposition or be a factor in causing seasonal affective disorder. Also, what we do know is that geography does play a big difference. So there are areas of the United States, obviously, if we're thinking about states like Alaska or more northern states, which may have less sunlight, may have longer and harsher winter periods where seasonal affective disorder does seem to be experienced at a higher rate, whereas in states like California and Florida, which tend to be south and have more temperate climates through the winter, we tend to see less seasonal affective disorder. So it's important to be aware just of like where you're located. Obviously, for our international listeners, this would apply again based on the climate, the amount of sunlight that is available to you. Just an important factor to be considering. Okay, so how is seasonal affective disorder diagnosed? So there actually is no technical diagnosis of seasonal affective disorder. I think, at least here in the United States, we rely on what's called the DSM, and the DSM-5 speaks about a depression with a seasonal pattern. But ostensibly, this obviously would have to be diagnosed officially by a professional. And again, depending on the type of treatment that you might want to seek for this, or the way that you want to manage or cope with some of these symptoms, that diagnosis could be very important to getting the right type of treatment. However, as I encourage all of our listeners, when it comes to anything pertaining to your mental health or anything pertaining even to your sexual health, your own tracking is really key, because when you sit down with a professional, whether you're coming to talk to somebody like myself or your primary care physician, a urologist, a psychiatrist, whoever you might be speaking to, they're only as good as the information that you bring them. So the more thorough that you can be in tracking your symptoms and documenting them and whatnot, the more accurate a diagnosis is going to be. So going back to some of the symptoms that we mentioned before, if you're noticing or you've experienced in the past that you are impacted by the seasons, just keeping like a little, journal, or, using the notes function on your phone, as well as probably some apps that are out there that can help you with symptom monitoring, that would all be helpful. So if you are one of those millions of people that either has seasonal affective disorder or is impacted by the seasons, what can you do about it? So there's a couple options that are available to you. So first and foremost, let's start with the most basic and the least invasive, which is doing an assessment about exercise, making sure that you are keeping a relatively healthy diet, and really focusing in on sleep hygiene. I think these are three adjustments that anybody can make even without professional guidance or help, that again can just help to lift some of the depressive symptoms. Also, if you are in a position where you can get out into sunlight during the day, take a walk, breathe fresh air, and get some sunlight, that also could be helpful. Now, If you've made those adjustments and you're still finding that you are dropping down into these periods of depression, to no avail. So there are a couple options available. So one is talk to a counselor. A lot of times people are more impacted by depressive symptoms during the winter months, or during times when sun is less accessible, less available. But a lot of times there's underlying pieces that are also there in the summer months that are not getting addressed. So one thing I would say is consider talking to a counselor. Another option would be to consider medications. Many people who do not regularly take medications for depression do use them seasonally, obviously with the guidance of a prescriber. And there are many people who do see positive results with that. But again, that would be talking to your primary care physician, or talking to a psychiatrist or another prescriber. Lastly, another treatment that's available is light therapy. There are light boxes that again, depending on the severity of your symptoms and whatnot, it's recommended to sit in front of them for a certain period of time daily. And that light, I believe, is intended to mimic the light of the sun. And just one word of caution, there are a lot of knockoff versions, not to say that this is a branded product per se, but there are a lot of lamps on various open marketplace websites that are not quite the product that you might be looking for. I'm not saying that they don't help per se, but there are very specific parameters to the types of light therapy boxes, or the types of lights that you should be using. So maybe we're going to leave a link in this episode to some of our recommendations for that. But those are some of the treatment options that are available if you wanted to try to treat this. Other things that a person can be doing to help just kind of alleviate the symptoms would be making sure that you are building a routine, in particular during the winter months. That consistency and activity, I should say. So like having a routine, I don't mean that like, well, I'll sleep till noon, I'll lounge in bed until 1. And like, it's very good that you put that onto a schedule, but I mean like a routine that has you up, activated, and moving. Again, like we mentioned before, sleep hygiene, making sure that you are getting to sleep at a good hour, getting enough rest. Other things that you can do are like building in some type of meditation practice, or a yoga practice, or something that will keep your mind grounded in the here and now. Depression, at least from some ways to look at it, a way that I look at it, is a collection of thoughts, or a collection of thought patterns. And sometimes just disrupting those thought patterns with something like mindfulness or meditation could be helpful. There also are apps for people who are not. I myself am not somebody who's very prone to meditation, but I know that some of the apps can be helpful. Okay. Other things that a person should consider is, I spoke about this hibernation factor. So a lot of people do tend to isolate, and they tend to feel much more isolated in the darker winter months. It's harder to be outside. It's harder to be on the streets, harder to just, get out in general. So thinking about a plan of, what am I going to do? How am I going to connect with people? And I don't mean just, relying on texting and, social media and video calls. They're important. I don't mean to take away from that. But I think if somebody can execute on a plan to really connect with people, see people, figure out how they're going to make that happen with some degree of consistency, that could also be really helpful. Now, let's kind of bring this all back around to erections and sexual function, and more broadly speaking, sexual relationships. So whenever somebody is feeling down, feeling low energy, not feeling great about themselves, libido is something that can be impacted by that. So that also is a major symptom of depression, and it's not uncommon. In fact, I see this quite often in the practice, is that we will see a significant uptick in either current clients who begin to experience or libido challenges right around this time period, or maybe a little bit after the holidays. And we also see an uptick in new clients reaching out who are experiencing either low libido or erectile dysfunction, which can obviously be driven by low desire or having a lower libido. So that connection is, obviously very understandable and well established. But the other thing to be mindful of is that even if you are somebody who is not impacted by seasonal changes, your partner might be, and the sexual routine that the two of you are accustomed to, or the way that you have been engaging with your partner, you may not be getting the same type of response if they are struggling with, or are experiencing, I should say, some form of impact due to the season. So they may not be as receptive or as responsive. Their libido may be impacted by this as well. So even if you are not experiencing impacts or seasonal affective disorder, depression, or whatnot, you may feel the rejection of your partner not responding to things that he or she previously were responding to. So it wouldn't hurt to check in with your partner. In fact, I would say it probably would be helpful to ask about their experience and to ask if they might be going through something during this season. That empathic connection could be really helpful for your relationship. And it may also be like put you in a position where you could be a support to your partner that may help lift them out of the depression and help things get back on track. Okay. Now, if you are experiencing erection issues, or you yourself have noticed a pattern that erections or sexuality in general just seems to be less robust during this time period. So number one, I think it's really important to not extrapolate that out to the rest of your life. I understand in many areas, including where I live, the winter period is pretty extensive and can take more than half the year to really come out of this winter period. So I don't mean to diminish the significance of the time period that people could be impacted by, but it's important to recognize that, hey, there's a pattern here, and I think a lot of that helps people keep motivated to better manage those winter months and to better manage their mental health through that, which oftentimes can lead to improved function, both with erections and with sexuality in general. If you're experiencing a loss of pleasure, generally speaking, it's a sign, I should say, that you are probably experiencing one of the symptoms of depression and seasonal affective disorder, which is anhedonia. This obviously can have a direct impact on erections. I think many of the people that I work with who are experiencing a bout of depression or are managing depression in general and also are having sexual function challenges, it does stem oftentimes from just not being in touch with anything which is pleasurable. What I notice in my work is that trying to reestablish some connection or some relationship with pleasure, even starting with things that are small, non-sexually driven in the beginning, can really help people just start to kind of combat some of that anhedonia, and can help them work their way up toward experiencing pleasure in the sexual realm. So again, one of the key pieces that I think for men who are experiencing depression is to be aware of what is happening. Like we've said so many times, and I can't say it enough, that experience of erectile dysfunction or just not having reliable erections and not knowing what's happening is very distressing. Being able to make sense of what might be driving the challenges with erectile function really, I think, is the first step and really is a key factor in being able to improve erection. So as we go into the fall season and into the winter months, if you are one of the millions of people who are experiencing or impacted by the change in season, if you are experiencing erection issues, or you have in the past around this time, and then they seem to get better or alleviate or whatnot, really maybe a sign that it's time to address the impact that the seasons are having on you. It's time to reach out to somebody like myself, or somebody that we can help connect you with, to really be able to take those steps towards improved erections.